Most women believe they already know what a man feels in the moment he enters them: desire, pleasure, maybe ego, maybe hunger. But the truth is far more intricate, far more haunting, and far more human than anyone ever talks about. Because what happens in that moment is not just physical, it is psychic. It is archetypal. It is a collision of instincts, shadows, and unspoken fears that even he doesn't fully understand. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And nowhere does a man come closer to facing himself than in the instant he is inside a woman." He may look confident, he may move with certainty, but beneath the surface lives a storm: power tangled with fragility, pride wrestling with fear, the lover archetype awakening while the wounded child hides in silence. He is not just touching your body, he is confronting his shadow, the part of him terrified of not being enough, terrified of being forgotten, terrified of being seen too deeply. His breath may be steady, but his unconscious is shaking, asking questions he will never speak aloud. Did I satisfy her? Does she still want me? Am I a man in her eyes, or just another body she'll forget? This is not a story of lust. It is a story of identity, bonding, validation, fear, and the search for wholeness. Intimacy does not just expose his body, it exposes his soul. And if you think men walk away untouched, unchanged, or unmoved, Jung would tell you that is only because they never learned to name the earthquake happening inside them. You're about to see what really happens beneath the silence, the stillness, and the performance. Not the man he shows you, the man he hides, even from himself. Part 1: The Silent Collision of Power and Fragility. The first thing a man feels when he goes inside a woman is not what the world assumes. It is not just arousal, not just instinct, not just the thrill of physical conquest. It is a sudden, quiet collision between power and fragility, a moment where he feels both the most masculine he has ever been and the most exposed. On the outside, the scene looks simple: a man entering a woman. But inside his psyche, something ancient awakens. Carl Jung would say this is the moment where the persona, the mask he wears for the world, comes face to face with the shadow he tries to suppress. He feels power because he has been chosen. A woman has opened her body to him, allowed him in, trusted him with a kind of closeness the world rarely grants. That touches his masculine archetype: the primal provider, the lover, the warrior who wants to claim, give, protect, and prove. But in the same breath, something else rises: the trembling fear of inadequacy. Because now he is not just inside her body, he is inside her judgment, her memory, her comparison, her emotional world. And whether he admits it or not, whether he acts like it or not, the question echoes inside him like a drum: Am I enough? This is the paradox women rarely see. His body may be confident, but his soul is asking for reassurance. His touch may feel dominant, but his unconscious is asking, will she still want me tomorrow? His movement may seem certain, but his heart is whispering, did I satisfy her, or did I disappoint her? Most men will never confess this, not to their friends, not to their partners, not even in therapy, because male vulnerability is not spoken, only acted out. Some hide it with ego, some with jokes, some with silence, some with distance. When he withdraws after intimacy, it is not always because he used you. Sometimes it's because he feels too much, not too little. Jung believed that the moment of union awakens archetypes. The lover feels alive, chosen, powerful. The child feels small, hoping not to be rejected. The warrior demands strength, refusing to show fear. The shadow whispers every insecurity he thought he outgrew. So while the world sees a man in control, Jung sees a man split in two, half lion, half wounded boy. And here is the part almost no one says aloud. Men don't fear the act of intimacy. They fear the meaning of it. They fear what you now know, now feel, now think. Because in that moment, you are holding not only his body, but the truth of him. He enters you physically, but you enter him psychologically. That is why the strongest men go quiet afterward. Not because there is nothing happening inside, but because too much is. Part 2: The Hunger for Validation. Why your reaction matters more than you think. Once the first wave of power and vulnerability settles, another force rises inside him: the need for validation. Not the shallow kind, not praise, not verbal compliments, but a deeper, quieter form of confirmation that says, "You wanted me. I mattered here. I was enough." Most women think men enter intimacy to take, but Jung would say a man enters just as much to be proven. Proven desirable, proven capable, proven worthy of being chosen, accepted, remembered. Because no matter how confident he pretends to be, no matter how many personas he wears, there is a part of him, hidden even from himself, that is waiting to see your response. Your body language, your breath, your eyes, the softness of your voice, the way you hold him afterward. These things speak louder to him than anything he will ever admit. That is why a woman who is present, receptive, and emotionally connected can make a man feel like a god. Not because she flatters him, but because her energy confirms the one thing he secretly fears isn't true: I am enough for her. But here is the side no one talks about. If a woman is distant, distracted, numb, or emotionally closed, it doesn't only disappoint him, it wounds him. Not because he expects performance, but because in that moment her silence becomes a mirror for his deepest insecurity. He won't say it. He might even act unfazed, but something inside him quietly asks, did I fail her? Was it forgettable? Did I do something wrong? Was I just a body, not a presence? This is where Jung's shadow returns, the part of him that remembers every past rejection, every moment of not being enough, every woman who didn't choose him. Those ghosts awaken, and suddenly, intimacy becomes less about pleasure and more about proof. A man can lie to the world about what sex means to him. He can joke, he can act detached, he can brag, perform, or disappear. But his nervous system doesn't lie. His soul doesn't lie. A woman's reaction becomes the unconscious verdict on his masculinity. That is why some men cling afterward, texting, calling, wanting closeness. That is why others pull away, acting cold, busy, indifferent. Not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much and don't know how to hold it. Here is the secret Jungian truth. A man does not seek validation because he is weak. He seeks it because intimacy exposes the part of him that the world never nurtured, the part that asks like a child, was I good enough? And until he learns to validate himself, he will keep searching for the answer inside a woman's body, hoping that this time the silence in him will finally be healed. Part 3. The Bonding Instinct. Why his body remembers you, even when his mind pretends not to. By the time the physical act is happening, most people believe the experience is happening only on the surface: skin, movement, breath, rhythm. But Jung would remind us, nothing that reaches the unconscious stays shallow. And intimacy does not touch only the body, it imprints the psyche. Once a man enters a woman, something ancient and biological starts happening inside him, whether he denies it or not. Bonding, not logical bonding, not I want a relationship bonding, but cellular, hormonal, archetypal bonding, the kind that forms before thought, before decision, before meaning. As oxytocin and dopamine flood his system, his nervous system begins to record her, her scent, her warmth, her voice, her emotional energy, the way she held him, the atmosphere around her. He may not realize it consciously, but his body is now linked to her frequency. This is why he may keep thinking of her long after he told himself it was just casual. Why her absence can feel too loud. Why another woman doesn't replace her as easily as he expected. Jung would say this is not just chemistry. It is the anima being awakened. The inner feminine inside every man, the part of his soul that seeks completion through union, suddenly recognizes her as the carrier of what he is missing. Not a woman. That woman. The one who triggered not just pleasure, but meaning. He won't call it that. He won't say, she reached my soul. Instead, he might say, I don't know why I can't forget her. I didn't even want anything serious, but she's still in my head. Why do I feel different around her? That difference is not accident, it is imprint. And this is why some men return again and again, not because they're using a woman, but because they're bonded to the emotional and energetic imprint she left in them. His mind may try to move on. His ego may act detached. His words may say, "I'm fine." But the unconscious does not obey words. It obeys experience. This is also why a man can sleep with many women and feel nothing. But one woman leaves a mark he can't explain. Jung would say she did not touch just his body. She touched his psyche, woke up his forgotten feminine self, and mirrored back the part of him he lost long ago. But this bond has two possible outcomes. If he is emotionally awake, it deepens into love, devotion, presence. If he is emotionally immature, it turns into obsession, clinginess, or fear-driven withdrawal. Because bonding is not always peaceful. Sometimes it terrifies him. Sometimes it exposes how lonely he really was. Sometimes it shows him he cared far more than he meant to. And so the modern man says, "I don't catch feelings easily." Yet his biology, unconscious, and archetypes betray him every time. He thought he entered her, but in truth, she entered him. Part 4. The War Between Fear and Love. Why he pulls away. Even when he feels deeply by now, something powerful is happening inside him, something no man ever plans for, no matter how strong, logical, or detached he believes he is. Intimacy begins to awaken not just desire, but emotion. And emotion for a man is rarely a gentle visitor. It is a force that shakes him, exposes him, and threatens the identity he carefully built. This is the point where fear and love collide. Not the romantic kind of love, not the poetic declarations, but the raw, unfiltered kind. The kind the unconscious whispers before the mind can silence it. The kind that says, "I care more than I should. I don't want to lose her. She affected me in a way I didn't expect." And immediately, fear rises to fight it. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being used, fear of being compared, fear of being replaced, fear of needing someone who might not need him back. Jung called this the moment where the shadow rises, the part of him that remembers every wound, the woman who left without explanation, the first heartbreak he pretended didn't hurt, the time he wasn't chosen, the moment he realized love makes you exposed. Intimacy reopens those sealed doors, and suddenly he is not just a man in a woman's body. He is a soul standing without armor. This is why, after intimacy, men often do the most misunderstood thing. They pull away. Not because they didn't feel anything, but because they felt too much. Not because they don't care, but because their caring scares them more than indifference ever could. Women see the silence and assume emptiness. Jung would say, silence is often emotional overload disguised as control. A man who feels nothing doesn't need space. A man who felt something he can't process does. He withdraws not to forget, but to regain balance, to put his armor back on, to separate the experience from the emotion, because he was taught that needing closeness makes him weak, and vulnerability is unsafe. But here is the irony. What he calls self-control is often the shadow resisting love. Some men run. Some numb themselves with distraction. Some pretend it was meaningless. Some force themselves into coldness. Not because love wasn't there, but because love threatened the identity they built without it. Jung believed that every man carries two forces inside him, the warrior who fears being consumed and the lover who yearns to surrender. Intimacy forces them to fight inside the same body. So if he distances himself, understand this: he is not avoiding you. He is avoiding the part of himself that came alive with you. He didn't expect to feel seen. He didn't expect to feel connected. He didn't expect to care who you are afterward. And now he stands between two truths: the instinct to run from the feeling and the longing to return to the place it was born. That is not indifference. That is emotional war. Part 5. Identity and Aftercare. How what happens after intimacy shapes who he believes he is. By the time the bodies are still, the real intimacy has only just begun. The world thinks the act ends when the motion stops. But Jung knew better. He knew that after the body quiets, the psyche begins to speak. And for a man, those silent minutes afterward are not neutral. They are identity-defining. Because in that space, when the physical intensity fades, He is suddenly left alone with one question the ego can't protect him from: how does she see me now? Not how good was I, but who am I in her eyes now that the performance is over? In that moment, he is more unmasked than at any other time. The persona, the confident version he shows the world, has fallen away. The body has already spoken. Now only truth and presence remain, and this is where aftercare, or the absence of it, becomes psychological surgery. A woman who stays close, touches, breathes softly, holds him, or simply stays present, she tells him, without a single word, "You were not just a body. You were wanted. You were received. You were real here." This doesn't just calm him, it stabilizes his identity. It tells the child, the lover, the warrior inside him, "You are still valued even in stillness." But when she turns away quickly, goes silent, checks her phone, acts indifferent, or emotionally disappears, he does not just register it as a moment. His shadow registers it as a verdict. I wasn't enough. She's already gone. I was only useful for the act. He won't say this. He will mask it with humor, distance, coldness, or logic. But the wound is already forming, because what happens after intimacy does not just affect his feelings, it affects his self-concept. Jung would say this is the moment where the self and the persona either align or fracture. When the outer world affirms his inner truth, he becomes more whole. When it rejects or ignores it, he splits further from himself, which is why one woman can make a man braver, more present, more loving, and another can make him colder, withdrawn, disconnected from his own soul. She didn't control him, she reflected him. This is the unseen power women hold, not over his body, but over the story he tells himself after it's over. A look, a tone, a softness, a dismissal. These things land not on his muscles, but on his identity. Men don't fear sex. They fear what it reveals about them afterward. Because in that moment, when the armor is gone, he is no longer the man he tries to be. He is the man he fears he really is. And the way she responds decides which one he goes home believing. Not because she is responsible for his worth, but because intimacy turns her into the mirror where he sees himself most clearly. He entered her body, but she now holds the story his soul will repeat. Part 6. The Unspoken Aftermath. Why men remember the feeling more than the act. Long after the room is quiet, long after the breath has steadied and the body has cooled, something continues inside him, something he will never admit, not even to himself. Because what lingers for a man is not the position, not the technique, not the physical memory, but the emotional imprint. Women remember details. Men remember atmosphere. He won't recall every word you said, but he will remember how safe or exposed he felt. He won't remember every movement, but he will remember whether he left feeling powerful, connected, used, or forgotten. Because men do not process intimacy through language. They process it through identity. And here is the truth Jung would insist on. A man does not remember the sex. He remembers who he was allowed to be in that moment. If he felt accepted, relaxed, desired without performance, his psyche registers home. He feels seen instead of evaluated. He feels chosen instead of used. He feels human, not just masculine. But if he felt judged, compared, rushed, or emotionally dismissed, his psyche registers danger. He may not say the words, but something in him shuts down. Not because he didn't enjoy the act, but because intimacy without emotional safety turns into self-doubt, wearing a strong face. And that is the irony. Men pretend sex means less to them than it does, when really, it often means more, but in a language they never learned to speak. He won't tell his friends, "I didn't feel validated." He'll say, "Yeah, it was fine." He won't tell you, "I felt disconnected afterward." He'll just get quiet. He won't confess, "I didn't know how to stay close without feeling weak." He'll say, "I'm just tired." This is why some men disappear, not because they didn't feel anything, but because they felt too much with no place to put it. This is why others cling, not because they are needy, but because they found something rare, a moment where their soul wasn't alone inside their body. A man's nervous system is trained to hide need, deny pain, and disguise attachment. But his unconscious is not trained. His unconscious tells the truth every time. That is why he may not miss you in words, but he will miss the version of himself that existed with you, the one who was allowed to soften, to feel, to drop the armor without losing his dignity. Jung taught that the soul speaks through symbols, not sentences, and intimacy is one of the deepest symbols there is, not of sex, but of self-recognition through another. You may think the moment ended when the bodies parted, but for him, it is only beginning, because now he must live with the echo of who he was in your presence and who he had to become when you were gone. And that echo is what stays, not the act, not the night, but the truth he silently walked away with. Part 7. The Final Mirror. How intimacy exposes the man he cannot hide from. There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when intimacy stops being an experience and becomes a reflection, a mirror held up to a man, forcing him to face the questions he spends his whole life avoiding. Because when the physical fades, the truth begins. Who am I when I am fully seen? And am I proud of that man or afraid of him? This is the secret most men carry. They don't fear the woman. They fear the version of themselves that appears in front of her. In the world, he can hide behind performance, status, humor, strength, logic, distraction. But in intimacy, all those masks fall silently to the floor. The lover replaces the competitor. The human replaces the persona. The boy he used to be stands beside the man he's trying to become. Jung called this the inner confrontation, the moment the shadow is no longer separate, but sitting beside him like a witness. If intimacy was safe, warm, present, and honest, he walks away feeling expanded, more whole, less fragmented. His masculinity feels anchored, not performed. His heart feels seen, not exposed. He is not just a man who had sex, he is a man who belonged for a moment in the world. But if intimacy was cold, disconnected, rushed, or transactional, he walks away shrinking into himself. He becomes quieter, harder, more calculated. He tells himself, it doesn't matter, when what he really means is, it mattered more than I can admit. This is how intimacy either heals him or hardens him. It does not just shape how he sees women, it shapes how he sees himself. Some men become better after intimacy, more gentle, more present, more aware. Some men become worse, more guarded, more numb, more detached, not because of the sex, but because of the reflection it gave them. A man grows when intimacy reinforces his worth. A man collapses when intimacy reminds him of everything he still doubts. And so, the cycle begins. If he felt safe, he will return, not for the body, but for the version of himself that awakened in her presence. If he felt reduced, he will distance, not because he didn't care, but because he cannot bear the echo of inadequacy replaying in his chest. Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Intimacy is that reaction. It is not just a merging of bodies, but a test of identity, self-worth, and soul honesty. In the end, the deepest truth is this: a woman does not change a man through sex. She changes him through what that closeness shows him about himself. He entered her body, but she entered his story. And long after the night is gone, he is still deciding what that story made him: stronger or smaller, whole or divided, awake or afraid. Not every man survives that mirror. But the ones who do, they don't just love, they evolve. Intimacy is not the act, but the awakening. We began with a simple question: what does a man really feel when he goes inside a woman? And now you know, it is never just physical. It is power and doubt, confidence and fear, desire and identity, shadow and soul. Jung taught that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And intimacy is one of the few places where a man comes face to face with his truth, not the truth he performs, but the truth he quietly carries. In that moment, he is not only entering a woman, he is crossing the threshold into himself. If the experience is safe, he expands. If it is cold, he fractures. If it is real, he remembers. If it is empty, he shuts down. Men do not fear sex. They fear what it reveals, the validation they crave, the wounds they hide, the love they didn't expect, the version of themselves they finally saw. And that is the hidden Jungian secret. A man does not return to a woman because of pleasure. He returns to the part of himself he discovered in her presence. If intimacy awakens his wholeness, he stays. If it awakens only his shadow, he runs. So the real question was never, what does he feel during the act? But who did intimacy allow him to be? Because bodies touch for minutes, but what they awaken in the soul can echo for years.